Hello, my name is Ian Osborne. Over the course of Lent, we move from Ash Wednesday through Good Friday to Easter Day, from death, ashes to ashes, to life, resurrection. A Christian's new life is achieved through their baptism. We go down into the waters as into a grave. We are reborn as in the gushing amniotic fluid at birth. So one tradition has us renew our baptismal vows on Easter Day. And therefore, during this Lent, we will reflect on the 6 traditional questions put to a candidate for baptism or to her godparents on her behalf. In St. Thomas à Becket, we use a simplified form of those questions for pastoral reasons, but in these talks, I shall use the traditional form. There are 5 weeks of Lent before Holy Week and 6 baptismal questions. So in this first week, I'm going to look at the first 2 questions, which are closely related. They are, do you reject the devil and all rebellion against God? And do you renounce the deceit and corruption of evil? The simplified form of these questions that we use at St. Thomas's avoids references to the devil because it's not culturally helpful. A lot of people will think of a pantomime character in red tights. Instead, we ask people to turn away from sin. The devil is mentioned in the Bible, of course, but interestingly, mainly in the New Testament. If you search for evil in the Old Testament, you'll find dozens and dozens of mentions of examples. But the word devil only appears once. Satan only a handful of times in the Old Testament, except in the book of Job. That's the Bible's most extended reflection on the nature of evil and suffering, and in that, Satan is a major player. The phrase evil spirit appears a few times in the Old Testament, but mainly as a way of talking about mental illness. Overall, it seems that seeing evil as personified in a fallen angel was not a strong feature of Jewish thought for centuries and centuries. It was only in the last century or two before Jesus that came to be dominant. Before that, of course, the Jews recognized that there was evil in the world, but they didn't see it as resulting from an individual's machinations. By the way, if you read Genesis carefully, there's no indication that the snake is anything except a reptile. What I think this means is that the personification of evil as Lucifer, a fallen angel, was a temporary cultural phenomenon. It's clearly a biblical truth that creation is badly broken and has become separated from God. But I don't think myself that the Bible requires us to believe in a personal devil. So we can see the devil as a being in this question. Do you reject the devil and all rebellion against God? Or you can see the devil as a metaphor. Personally, I vary. Evil does seem to me, sometimes it seems so enterprising, so cunning, that I drift towards seeing it as a personal project of one who wishes creation harm. But overall and mainly, I follow the mainstream view of evil that was worked out first by St. Augustine of Hippo, which teaches that evil is fundamentally lacking. It fundamentally doesn't have its own creativity, its own energy, its own order. Evil can't create anything. It can't establish order out of chaos. Evil is essentially parasitic. And so that second question, do you denounce the deceit and corruption of evil, refers, I think, to this, that evil and sin takes what is good and beautiful and they corrupt it. And any apparent glamour of evil is an illusion, a deceit. Evil drains away the colour from life and replaces it with greyness. A life given over to evil is not a dynamic life, but likely to be one lacking in discipline, direction, and purpose. Let me illustrate the parasitic nature of evil by considering a few examples. For example, exploiting others' bodies to give you sexual pleasure, lust. Sex is a good and beautiful thing when it bonds people, when it contributes to the building up of a lifelong covenant. But when it ceases to be about giving, about cementing a union of two whole lives, and instead becomes only about the body, only about taking gratification, well, that's sin. A good and beautiful thing is corrupted into a bad one. That's the nature of evil. Or let me take the example of an exploitative employer or landlord. It is in itself a good and noble thing to create work, to offer people a home, so long as you do it on fair terms, terms which enable those weaker or poorer than yourself to live a good life. But when you use your economic power to build yourself up and harm others, then this is sin. Again, we see the corruption of a good thing into a bad thing. That's the nature of evil. A third example, very briefly, is anger. Self-respect is a good thing, and that involves setting boundaries in one's interactions with others. Or a passionate desire to change what needs to be changed, what we might call righteous anger. These are good things. But most people's anger is a caricature of those good traits. Mostly we get angry not so much because we're setting boundaries out of self-respect, but because we're trying to control others, and we lose our rag when they fail to fall in line with our wishes. And speaking personally, one of my most besetting sins is an anger that I might believe is righteous, an anger that relates to cruelty or selfishness. But in fact, that anger is full of ego, of self-assertion, of a refusal to be ignored, if you like. A few examples of how positive sins represent the corruption of a good thing. And if we are aware of such positive things in our lives, then of course we should try and turn away from them. But knowing the people of St. Thomas à Becket, I believe many of you are living lives in which flagrant sins like that are not easily visible. What if you survey your life and you can't see anything major as being disordered or sinful? Well, one answer is not a very good answer. To become a bit neurotic, picking yourself up on every minor lapse of manners or thoughtfulness. Instead, if this is your situation, I would advise you to look towards the good things of your life and consider whether they have taken up such importance as to bind you. Whether good though they are, they have become corrupted by selfishness or fear or idolatry. Let me give you an example. Family love. Family love is a good thing. Because of it, people give money to their children to help them buy a house, for example. Because of it, some people spend a lot of time caring for their grandchildren, expressing love towards the children and also helping the parents to continue their careers. This all flows from love, which is obviously a good thing, not a sin. But some people devote such a lot of time to helping family that they have little energy or time to help others. Even though, when you think about it, those others may in fact be in much greater need. Jesus said, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. Instead, love your enemies, lend without expecting to be repaid. The virtue of family love can, if it grows to be disproportionate, distract us from our greater duties towards God and our neighbour. Universal case, perhaps a more important example, concerns how we value life itself. Human existence is good, rich, beautiful, full of opportunity. God delights when, during our years on earth, we explore life's possibilities, exercise our talents, flourish. But all of this goodness is placed in our way, not for its own sake, but so as to point us towards God who gives us these good things. But it is so easy for us to fixate on the good thing itself and fail to look beyond it to the giver. God's desire for us, I believe, is that we appreciate the glories of human existence, but also that we continually transcend them. Spiritual maturity will allow us to see the good things of life clearly, valuing them for what they are, but not being too attached to them. Instead, each will remind us of the goodness of God. This capacity for detachment, valuing the giver more than the gift, is all the more important in the later stages of life. As a priest, I spend a fair amount of time with people who are moving towards the end of life. The end of an earthly life can be rather beautiful for a person who has learned to value the giver more than the gift. But for someone who is still fixated on the things of earth for their own sake, mortality, well, can simply feel like being burgled, like being mugged. It can feel like pure loss. So this Lent, let us consider our sins, my friends. It doesn't really matter much whether we think we are being tempted by the devil or simply let down by our own immaturity or foolishness. Either way, our sins are, in general, a corruption and a distortion of things that are in themselves good. So if you have distinct failings, then look to them. But you would be wise also to consider whether any of the virtues, any of the loves in your life have grown disproportionate and are distracting you from your duties towards God and other people. Value the gift by all means, but let it draw you to valuing the giver even more.